Let's jump in. Friends, good to see you guys. I've met many of you, not quite everybody yet, so it's good to see you. What we're gonna do today is I'm gonna kind of chat a little bit about what does it mean to raise support? What does that look like? I put the quest for sustainability, and particularly we're gonna focus in on, I'm gonna start with giving a larger scheme of things about raising support, what that is, how it's not begging for money, how it's not doing these other things, it's not panhandling, it's not having a real job, it's any of those things. So we're gonna talk about some of that. And then kind of set it within the, hey, y'all, come on in. Welcome, welcome. Sit anywhere you want. Looks like this table. Go ahead and grab a pamphlet here. Whatever you sit. Yes, please. And then we're going to dive in more particularly around, I'm going to give you a framework for how to share your story. I'll give the larger framework of, hey, if you're going to ask somebody to partner, what does it look like to raise financial support? I'll give you the high overview, and we're going to focus in on the beginning of sharing your story. And the reason for that is people give to people. And so we're going to talk about, hey, here's your story, how to craft your story, here's some pillars in that. And I'm actually going to give time for y'all to take some time to craft some of your story, to get kind of a rough first draft. Some people would say poopy first draft. I don't cuss, so clearly I wouldn't say anything else. It's not true, but it's being recorded. Future friends. And then if there's a brave volunteer, and I got a prize for you, I'll have somebody come up and do their first draft. I'll give some feedback so you hear some feedback and do those things. I say nice things for the most part. You can ask Druzy. I only made him cry 3 times when we met. No, didn't make him cry at all. So nice things to say. But yeah, that's the scope of where we're going to go today. Seem good? Awesome. All right, so you have this pamphlet in front of you. Mainly, it's just kind of, I'm going to be real frank with you, it's my notes that I just threw into a thing, and then you have access to it there. So space to jot down notes in the sections as we go. One of the things I do want to draw your attention to, if you go to the extra resources, it's probably like page 7 or 8. There's a little bingo game. And I forget what I called it, but I'm a creature of habit, and I do some of the same things all the time. And so if you want to follow along in that way, there are things there. The only one that probably needs explanation is my ADHD bracelet, which is this one right here. You'll find myself, if you're going to start talking or something, and I'll go like, okay, yeah, This is just me trying to do everything I can to get all these little neurons to pay attention to you and not the 50 other things that my brain wants to do at that point. So I'll be doing that. It's the only thing that needs explanation. Follow along, just shout, bingo. If you're the first one to hit, and I have a prize for you as we go along, starting, bracelet's back on my wrist, not being played with yet, starting now. So with that, I would love to do some introductions, in part because as I talk about it and as I share, I'm a really contextual person. I think context really helps me. So I'd love to just hear from a few folks in the room. It doesn't need to be everybody. Kind of, hey, what's the ministry that brought you here today? You're like, quest for sustainability. What's that sustainability? What are you doing that you hope some sustainability would be there for? And then what is it that brought you to that session? Like what kind of financial questions, I did appreciate the image that got used was just somebody holding a bunch of cash on the website. So it's like, in case you were wondering what we're talking about, money's part of it. And so I would love to just kind of hear that. So if there's a few folks that would love to share, what's the ministry that brought you here today? And kind of what are you thinking about the financial sustainability in that? So anybody can share. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. There are 2 things. First, Druzy, what's the context of this recording? Should I be repeating things? No. Okay, cool. I just want to double check. All right, sweet.
Probably always help, John. But no, you're good.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right, I'm going to...
There's no set rules for it.
No, that's great. I'll summarize those 2. I just wanted to, all right, sweet. That's great. The other comment, league. Literally this morning I said, I'm not smart enough for league. Right? Yes, every time I've tried playing, I play with my brother who does some streaming and is a YouTuber, and he just is like, hey, watch out, so-and-so in the other lane's like, ult's about to come back. And I'm like, bro, I don't even know what my ult is, and you're keeping track of that ult cooldown? Like, I cannot do this.
That would be hilarious.
It would be so bad. Yes. Just... Yes, that's great. Awesome. For the recording, so far we have Gwen, who is working with Jesus Otaku, and would love to spend some more time in that ministry, at some level, what that looks like. And we have Boots, who's a league streamer, talking about community building and would love to be able to be funded to do that part-time, full-time, what that looks like. Awesome. That was for repeat. You guys all heard it, but online friends. I heard somebody over here starting to volunteer.
So I've already talked about that.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Mike talked about ministry nerds in Christ and the idea of being able to provide for a family while doing it and making that happen and having all the ideas in the world. It's the same, like, man, if I had more time, what could I do with this stream or this extra thing? If I had more time, what could I do with this thing? And so, yeah, it's good. One more? Somebody burning?
Yeah.
Awesome. Jamie from Satellite Gaming talking about growing ministry and growing team and what that looks like and how potentially support raising could help expand, scale, do those things, buy some time while the organization continues to grow. Yeah, it's great. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for sharing. And then at some point, too, we'll be sharing some stories. And when folks are working on their stories, I might just kind of come and peek my head around tables and ask questions. And can't wait to hear more of what you guys are doing. So a bit of an introduction to me, kind of the story, how I got here. It's basically, I grew up in a Christian household and knew all the right things. I won the Best Christian Award in high school, went to a Christian high school. It wasn't called the Best Christian Award. It's what they meant, and I got a trophy for it and everything, y'all. I think my mom still has it. I wish she would get rid of it, but alas, here we are. So I knew all the right things, how to do those things, and then came out of college and started doing ministry. I raised support to do that ministry, and all of a sudden was realizing, like, oh man, my internal world is not healthy. I know how to do the right things, say the right things, but this having sustainable ministry and growing, got introduced to the Enneagram. It ruined my life. It was not great. But so all these things, that kicked off a 2 to 3 year kind of break from ministry. I was managing at a Starbucks. I worked in a warehouse with my father-in-law, doing these things. I call it my Moses desert years. And then I've been trying to get back into ministry, trying to do these things, and I'm sitting at a Starbucks with a pastor friend of mine, and I'm just I feel like God's I keep saying yes, I keep trying to do the things that God keeps saying no. God keeps saying no. I'm opening myself to what's going on. And then sitting there at that Starbucks table, David, my pastor, goes, well, sort of. I started boiling inside. I was like, what do you mean, sort of? No, I'm opening myself. Hey, come on in. I'm opening myself up. I'm saying yes to all these things. Grab a seat anywhere, man. Yeah, here, it's perfect. Yeah. Opening myself up, all these things. He's like, well, there's this church plant in London that you said you weren't interested in. And I said, okay. Still mad at you, but it's fine. I'll consider it. Let's consider it. Really long story short, for the sake of this time, basically, my wife had a different conversation that day. I had a conversation that day, and we both came together, and we're like, are we going to London? Is this about to happen? And it was just this really cool thing. Another really long story short, we ended up not going to London, but we ended up joining a church plant that was happening as a church planting resident in Bloomington, Indiana, where IU is. It finally has a football team this year, which has been incredible. And so we started doing this church planting residency, and I just fell more and more in love with church planting. And one of the things that hadn't happened is I hadn't seen people planting the way that I wanted to plant, the way the micro planting I wanted to do, the way that I was in a neighborhood, show up, be present to a group of people that maybe people weren't focusing on. Maybe it's a weird group, it's a different group, and really incarnationally planting myself. Can you start to tell why I love being here with you guys so much, right? I had this idea back in 2015. I really wanted to see more of that and what that looks like. And so doing a church planting residency, and we start praying, I was like, okay, we're going to plant in Indianapolis. We're going to go plant a church. So my wife and I, we go to Walmart and we buy a map of Indianapolis, and we sit in Bloomington, Indiana, college dorm. It's not a dorm, but college town apartment, so it's kind of like carpet like this, but hasn't been changed in 40 years. Who knows what's happening on it? We're on the floor. My 8-month-old's crawling around, and we're just pinning neighborhoods. We're like, God, sorry, I'm a crier. Get used to that. Just thinking back at that in that ministry. Hey, come on in. Welcome to me crying. It's a great session. Yeah, grab a seat anywhere in the building. There's some pamphlets right here in the middle of the table. Just thinking back, and we're just pinning these maps and going okay, God, we want to come and plant ourselves in a place. in a small place and to be present neighbors and to do these things. What do you have for us? And that's where we ended up into the neighborhood that we do. And I could keep going on all these stories, but I look back at this, like pinning these little things on a map and writing the things and going, God saying, like, this is the place. Bay Chendricks, Indiana. If you're ever there, if you come hang out with LTN at Gen Con, I'm really close to there. Come hang out. But that's my story, how we ended up, I didn't get you here, but that's how we planted. And so we started planting missionally in our neighborhood, and the stories I could share and all the things, but being support-based to plant there was amazing. And then really long story short, did they go in? Yeah. Okay, great. And then just, take some time, fast forward a few years. Now we work with Reliant. I'm still pastoring that church. We ended up joining in with a different church, still pastoring there. But I get to work full-time at Reliant to help other people find that thing that they're trying to do, a lot of times that unique thing, and be able to sustainably do that, to be able to say yes to the vision that God has placed on their hearts in the living room of their carpets and the rooms that they're at, and do those things. And so that's who I am. That's what got me here. And what you may notice is that I just shared my story with you. There's some elements of story that we'll talk about here in a minute, and the way that I shared it, and the way that we share, and the way that I think you can share your story when you share with people about what's God called you to, what's going on, what's happening. So before we get fully into that, let's talk about what is support raising, or you'll hear me use the word MTD a lot. What is that? Acronym? Is that right? Acronym. MTD stands for Ministry Team Development. Quick show of hands, who here loves the idea of raising support? Sitting down with somebody at coffee. Okay, great. There's always a few, which is great. Awesome. Yeah, sitting down, having coffee with somebody, saying, hey, here's the vision, here's what God's doing, and then I'm going to give you a really direct ask for money. Some people, they're like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. Most people in the room, you're like, I would rather die, please. That sounds awful. And so what we're going to talk about really quick is just the idea of what it is that we talk about when we're raising support. What does that look like? I'm going to go to a few of my favorite biblical foundations for raising support. There are lots. I don't use any of the classic ones, I don't think. I just use my favorite as a missional theology church planter in the city. I like to talk about the people of God and the kingdom of God and those sorts of things. So I'm going to use my favorites. If you want some other classic ones, let me know. We can chat about it. But the Bible is full of people who are set aside or called by God for a particular thing. And then the people of God in a larger realm then support that thing that person is doing, right? And a lot of times within a church context, we talk about like, hey, we have this tithe that we're sharing together as the people of God to support the few people that are helping lead us and guide us and do these things, and that's the pastoral salary. That's what it is. Your pastor is raising support in tithe and offering, and what that is that's the people of God together saying, hey, we think that what we have here and the thing we're doing is really good. We're going to contribute to that. We're going to be a part of that. And so that you can be set aside to help sustain this part of our life and to help lead and pastor us and what that looks like. So there's lots of examples from that. You have the Levites, you have the disciples, you have Paul. I like to joke that half the New Testament is just support letters that got canonized. Like you have these things and, making sure to yell at people for doing really silly things. But then a few of my more specific favorite examples, I just like to go back to Acts 2. And bring this back to who the people of God are and what it means to share the resources of the people of God. Hey, we are the people of God together. We're living life together. We're sharing all the things that we have. Why and towards what? Towards letting people know the love of Christ, being the love of Christ with one another. We're sharing what we have. We're going to come back to that. The next, I skipped ahead a little bit on the outline there, but you have 3 John 1, 5 through 8. They're writing about the idea of hey, let's give towards this thing that's happening over there. It's not the community, it's not the thing that's happening here. We're giving towards the thing happening over there. And he says, we ought to support such people so that they may become co-workers with the truth. So you're giving, and what you're doing in your giving is you're becoming a co-worker. You're joining in the work. Or, put on the other way, when you're inviting somebody, you're over here, and you're inviting them over there to give, you're saying, hey, come be a part of the work of God is doing. Come be a co-worker with me. It's a little different than begging for money, right? It's like, hey, join me in the thing God is doing. Here's his co-working way. And, the last is just kind of easy. I think Jesus' ministry was support-based, so he did it. Seems pretty good to me. If you ask, you have the example, Luke 8, 1 through 3. He's talking about these are the people that were moving with them, and then he describes as a list of women. that were also traveling with them who provided for them out of their resources. This is normally where I like to put a Beyonce joke in and say, who runs the world? Girls. Supporting Jesus' ministry, making it happen. It's not a joke, right? The Beyonce reference is the joke, but it's you'd be surprised. I get in some settings where I got to be real careful with that joke. So I mean it. So then those are some of the biblical things. MTD stands for Ministry Team Development. Development is very normal in the nonprofit world. So, right, somebody's going to talk about development. Most nonprofits, large nonprofits, they have development teams, they have development officers, they have these things. The thing that they're doing is they are developing relationships. They are developing networks of people that know and care about the mission and the thing that's happening. They're developing those relationships, developing those networks, developing those conversations so that those can happen, right? This is what they're doing. This is development. A little bit of that. It's deeply relational. It's because people give to people. You're developing relationship. You're doing these things. So then that's development. The team part, again, you're inviting people to come and join you in the work that God is doing. You're inviting them to come be a part of it. So you're developing a team of people that are joining in the work. Not just, give a little side note here, not just financially. I think when you sit down, I think it's good to invite people to say, will you pray with me in this ministry? Will you, I know I'm knowing some of the things happening in this room, there's a lot of online ministry. It's like, come be a part of this thing. Come be online. Come disciple people that are in our Discord. Come be a part of this conversation. You're inviting them into doing those things as well. And then ministry. Yes, you're raising for ministry. The thing that you're doing is ministry. But I'm going to tell you, if, just keep pointing to Druzy, who's been having these conversations over the last year with folks and inviting them in, you end up actually doing a lot of ministry, right? In these conversations that you're having, you're talking about, one, here's the things that God's doing, but you're ministering to these people that you're building relationship with, and you're building a team with, and you're doing ministry. So this whole thing is ministry, too. Again, not begging for money, right? So ministry team development with this biblical basis, that's what that is. I'm going to do really quick here in a second, I'm going to do a flyover of what I think then, if you're like, so if those are the things that's happening, that's what's going on. You get a meeting with somebody, you sit down in a room, what should that kind of overall flow look like? I'm going to kind of talk about that, some shapes and some helpful handholds that I think. But before I get into that, any questions about maybe the biblical piece, MTD, something like, dude, I call bullcrap on you, and if we don't have that conversation now, then you're not going to hear anything else I say. So anything along those lines. Yeah. Yes, so I think what I hear you asking is like that maybe some of the language I'm using is making it sound like if you're raising for a team or you're raising as an organization, this is for that, but you're asking is it the same for an individual missionary? Yes, totally. It's a great clarification, 100%. So, and that's, I would say even probably more the emphasis of that I would mean in this room is that individual. So when I say ministry team development, what you're talking about is like you as an individual are then developing a team of people that are going to come alongside you and partner with you in this ministry. Because it's not going to be, this will be one little quick good side note. There are about 5,327,271 ways to fund your ministry. This is one of them. Raising support among a group of people you might have, if you're going to talk about like a full-time, normal salary, that sort of thing, you might have anywhere from, using this model, 60, 70, 80 partners giving on a monthly basis that give in these like smaller amounts and do these things. It's people you know and that sort of stuff. This is one of those ways. You might go the grant route. You might have, the lead pastor who's doing a lot of development. Like I think Lux, right, Mark, you're doing a lot of development for the entire organization as a whole in some ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold, but yes, a
Yeah.
lot of the funding conversations are all done by me.
Yeah. So there's different models. None of them are bad. None of them are wrong. Trying to monetize your stream, like all these things are all fine models. And so then today we're talking about just to kind of, I said a lot of things to come back to, yeah, it would be about like in your specific instance, it would be, hey, I'm doing this as a missionary. Here's the thing I'm doing. Would you join me in being a part of this and give monthly? Would you pray with me? Would you connect me with other people that might want to hear more? This sort of a thing. But then you're building a team of people that are supporting you and behind you in that ministry. Yeah. Not to play league. Yeah. You don't have to carry all your supporters. So it's good. Awesome. Yes. corporate sponsorships.
And partnerships.
I think totally. I think some of the principles could definitely work. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. Sorry, the question was, would this translate back out to like secular corporate partnerships and somebody giving towards that? I think a lot of the principles of story and how you would craft a message would apply. This is very particularly going to be a lot of like you're inviting mostly other Christians to come and join. Now I would encourage you can invite non-Christians because they'll go like, oh, you're caring for the need, like those who are depressed. You know, I think some of the stats that stick out a lot for me, especially with those of you that are doing ministry in online settings of like, here's the percentage of youth that are online, here's the percentage of youth that are depressed, and we're just trying to be present in the place that they are. Like you share some of those things, anybody's like, oh, you're making a difference there? Yeah, totally, let me be a part of that, I want to do that. So some of that stuff easy translates, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think I have bingo.
All right, perfect, what'd you get?
I've got 100% people give to people using hands when talking, and then there was a clear millennial reference to just Beyonce.
Yeah, that counts for sure. That counts for sure, no, it's great. Yep, nope, I was waiting for a shouted bingo, so.
Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. All right, I'll keep moving. Let me know if you have questions, and especially because we're having at that time where people are kind of workshopping stuff, I can run around and answer questions.
I think Beyonce transcends all generations, so that's just
100. Yes. That was great. Awesome. All right, so a quick flyover before I jump into story and sharing story. This is, again, maybe for those that are just joining and where we're at, we are on page 2. I am cruising. Look at me. So we are on page 2, and I'm going to be talking about flyover MTD. So I put this as the ministry team development appointment flow. So you've sat down with somebody, you're about to have a conversation, invite them to be a part. What's the kind of general flow level of that conversation? And here's what we're going to talk about. So I think you're going to start, if you end up going through our training, you're going to see way too many videos of me, and I apologize in advance. But you're going to see me do this with my hands a lot. But basically what you're going to do, sorry, I'm going to go the other way to work left or right for you guys. So you're going to start with a relational opening. You just got coffee with somebody, sit down, don't go, now, can I tell you about my good Lord Savior? You know, there's a choice, I forget what it is. Anyways, you're not going to jump right, hey, how are you? How are those kids? If you got connected to somebody and this is somebody new, like get to know them a little bit and understand what their story and what that looks like. Taking some time to be human because we're like building relationship here, right? One of the best ways to make it go from relationship building and team development to begging for money and using somebody is to like not get to know the person that you're dividing and doing these things. So relational opening, and then you're going to share your story. This is what we're going to spend the rest of our session on, is that story piece of it, talking about that section and what that looks like. And you're going to share your story in 3, 4, 5 minutes, something to kind of give a good example. And then next thing is you're going to share the need. What's the need for this ministry? What's the need for the thing that you're doing? And you're going to start with the need. A lot of times you might share a story of that need. It might be a need that is, let's say, hey, you're going to come on and, we gave the shout out, and I think Lux might be one of those organizations that are like, hey, you want to be a resident? Come hang out. That'd be great. But like, hey, you're going to go there, and you might tell a story from Lux. Like, hey, Lux had this person come through, and here was the need, and this person explains it. Or something in your own life. Here's the need. So that's the need. And those are a great place for statistics, to kind of share the statistics. But you're most often going to also share a story within the need. Attach it to a person. You can change the name of that person, what that looks like. For example, when I talked about my church plant and I was raising, I told the story of a woman named Natalie, who, when I was managing the nonprofit coffee shop in the neighborhood, I invited her to a neighborhood meeting, and she said, oh, that's that meeting in the church up the road, right? I said, yeah, totally. And she was like, I can't do it. I don't do churches. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, too many bad Catholic school memories. I said I would never step foot in a church again. And I took some time to explain, hey, it's nothing to do with, they don't even come. They actually don't even like that we're there. This whole thing, just come to the meeting. She's like, I just can't do it. And I talk about that's the need for really incarnational planting in the city of Indianapolis and what this space looks like. So that would be an example, right? The need. And then what we've been building to, this is the flow, and you see how if I was able to print this in color, but FedEx charges a lot of money for color printing, and that was not happening. But it would be the center of the gospel. It's the gospel. the answer to that need starts with the gospel. It's the center of your presentation. What's the good news of Jesus? What's the good news of the thing happening? How does, and this is oftentimes a great place to just share a brief, real quick synopsis of like, what is the gospel to you? What does it mean? The good news of Jesus, the good news of the kingdom of God here. What does this mean? And then you're going to start talking about from there the answer to that need. So rooted in Jesus, here's the ministry that I'm going to do. Here's the things that are happening. Maybe here's the organization that I'm a part of. Here are the things that I'm going to be doing. Here's the initiatives that we're already doing. So you're going to be kind of starting from doing those things. And then you are going to give, and I can talk more about this, but you're going to give a kingdom invitation into partnership. And what that doesn't look like is it doesn't look like, I just thought if it would be cool, maybe you'd want to consider thinking about maybe just doing a thing and that would be nice. Okay, talk to you later, leave me. Okay, bye, right? Like, because that's, it's different. I don't know about you guys, so one of the things, especially, I think it's talked about a lot right now, but like, back in the day when I first started teaching this session, I would talk about tipping in an Uber. Like, it's like, do I tip an Uber? What's normal? Now I feel like it's tipping everywhere. Like everything has a point of sale is like a tipping thing. And it's like, what's normal? What's not normal? I don't understand. What are these things? I don't. And so when you give a direct invitation, you're setting a norm. You're also treating that person like an adult. This is one of my soapboxes. This is not part of our normal training, but this is one of my things that I say, is when you don't give a direct ask, you're not actually giving them like human adult autonomy to make a decision. You're deciding for them, you're doing those things. And so now what that doesn't look like is it doesn't look like shaking them down for money. It doesn't look like doing these things. But you can go, hey, here's the things. I've shared the need, did that. A lot of times in the answer to the need, you can share another story. You can share another story of here's how that need was answered. Here's how this ministry is doing this thing. And then you might summarize with like, here's why I've said all that thing. I've been talking for a little while. Do you have a question? And then they'll like, I might have a question, and you answer that. And you go, great, hey, thank you so much. Just a reminder, here's why this is really important to me. I think because there's so much happening in the streaming space right now, and especially in League of Legends, which can be considered by so many people one of the most toxic cultures in games, to be a present, sorry, I'm going straight for it, right? But to come and be the presence of Christ, to be a place, to be in that space, offering people hope and offering something different, I think this is a place where Jesus is ready to meet the millions and millions of people that are playing this game across the globe. So, like I said, there's a few ways that people can partner with me in that. Can I talk about some of those more with you? They'll go like, yeah, totally, because they sat down with you, right? Awesome. There are 3 ways people can partner. I need people to pray with me in this ministry. I'd love to get connected to some other people that might want to hear more about what God is doing. And lastly, is to partner financially so I can continue to spend more time doing this thing. Can I share more about that financial piece with you? And they'll go like, yeah, sure. You see, it was direct ask. Can I share more about that financial piece with you? Great. Awesome. I'm trying to raise the funds I need to be able to go and join this ministry that I love and spend more time doing this ministry and doing that thing. And part of that is inviting people to give monthly towards the thing that I'm doing. Right now, I have partners anywhere from like $5 a month to $200 a month. I have a buddy giving, he's like, I can eat ramen one more time a month. I can give $5 a month. And I have people that are giving annual in large amounts, but somewhere between that $5 and $200 a month. Right now, I'm really hoping and praying for about an average of $125 a month. So I was wondering, Druzy, would you be willing to partner with me at about $100 a month? And then you're going to sit in silence. And you're going to be screaming inside. It's so many things going on in you, so many like things. And what they're thinking about is they're like, that does sound pretty awesome. And he'd talk to my wife, and he'd do that thing. Also, what was that meeting I had after this? I totally forgot. And they're going to give you the answer that most people give. They're going to go, maybe. Let me think about it. And you go, awesome. You're going to keep the ball in your court. I'm just giving you all these little tidbits, and we're going to get to story here in a second. You're going to keep the ball in your court. Great. Awesome. I hear you need some time to think about it. When would be a good time to follow up? Can I follow up with you in 2 or 3 days? They'll be like, yeah, awesome. Great. I'll call you in 2 or 3 days. And you're going to call them in 2 or 3 days. I highly suggest calling. And they're going to look at the phone. And you're going to be nervous that whole time. You're going to be like, they're going to think I'm bugging them. They're going to hate me. This is going to be awful. They're going to look at their phone. They're going to say an expletive, either out loud or in their thing, and go, I forgot to think about that thing. And then they're not going to answer your call. Because they just got done changing a diaper, right when they got done, like these things are happening. And let me be really transparent. 1 in 100 people will have some kind of offense at you asking them. They are. It's about them. It's not about you. It's about them. But for the most part, the rest of them are just living lives, and they just forgot. So you'll call them again the next day, 2 or 3 days later, and then eventually they're going to go like, yes, I would love to partner. Or like, hey, we can't right now, but I would love to pray. Can I continue praying? Can you keep me on the prayer list and do those things? So there's MTD in a few minutes. That's the really quick flyover. I can talk about any of those things more if you want, but I wanted to give you kind of a context for then I think the story piece. And as you can see, we spend quite a few hours in training help you build out all of that, and talk about those strategies and talk about all these things. But the thing I want to talk about today is just your story. And so I'll jump into it fairly quick because I do want to have time to have you guys work on a bit and then have somebody come up and give an example as well. And so here's what makes a good story. People give to people. This whole thing is relational, so help them get to know you. You're helping them get to know who you are, bits of what's going on, and what God has been doing in and through you. The pieces of how God works in and through you, the things that God's doing. And so the easiest method that we talk about is we talk about sharing your story with Polaroids. And so imagine, right, this little snippet, instant snapshot, here's a story. So if you think about it, I told you lots of history about my story, right? I told you like, hey, here's this history, here's how I got here, here's some things. But can anybody like take a guess at what one of my Polaroids was?
You sitting on the floor with your family?
Right? Sitting on the floor. It's this tangible, you have this expression. I talk about the carpet in a college town condo that most of us are familiar with. Like there's something there that helps that story stick, that helps that story be relatable. But then I took this whole 2.5 year, lots of tears, so many conversations, exponential trips trying to figure out what church planting meant, and I condensed it into, we were pinning things in a map on my college floor one night. Right? So you're kind of sharing these Polaroids as a way to help invite somebody in, what that looks like. Your story likely contains 2 Polaroids for sure, how God saved you, what that looks like. I skipped mine. It was VBS at a Southern Baptist church, and they told me I was going to hell, and I said, that sounded awful, so I said yes. And then God has continued to disciple me and save me and do these things, right? But I skipped that part in mine, but talk about this like, hey, I grew up in a Christian household, and here are these things, and I knew how to do it, but then I had this crisis moment. And now I'm like, oh, what does this mean to like reconcile my faith, to have my own faith, to do these things? What does that mean? So how God saved you, and then how you came into ministry is often a great thing. Oftentimes, how you came into this ministry. How is it? When did you realize the need for this ministry, and what was the first thing you said yes to? What was the first place that you came into this ministry with? Those are 2, for sure, great Polaroids. And then you can kind of add another one to kind of fill in some of the gaps if maybe there's a larger gap between those 2 different things, or there's another context you want to give. You can kind of shape those things. A good story is clear. So one of those things about clarity is can somebody tell you again those Polaroids, right? Can somebody tell you those Polaroids? You're really trying to condense down. You're not wandering. You have a few good click points. And so you're trying to have it be clear. Concise. This depends on the context. Do not hold this as a rule of thumb, but typically what we encourage folks is you're going to share your story in about 3 to 5 minutes. And so there are those who, I've had some conversations with some of you. I'm not looking at anybody in the room in particular, but some of you have lived some years. You've lived more years than other people may have. The rest of the room, your story might be a little longer. There might be some things that are there. If you're a couple that's raising together, your story could be a bit longer. There's some things, but 3 to 5 minutes is a good bit to kind of introduce them, get into the flow. It's like, God save you. Here's how you kind of got into the ministry and what that looks like. And then compelling. So show, don't tell, have these memorable moments. And so, again, show, don't tell. Here's a story of the carpet. I like to use a Starbucks example because we all know what a Starbucks smells like, right? Like you sit down, you know what it's like to try and find this little table. Well, now they're actually a lot more spacious and it's more comfortable. But back in the day, it was like crammed and it's loud and all the things. And so you know what a Starbucks feels like. So I'm like, hey, couching this conversation here. And relatable terms. I forget who said it this morning, but in the nerd space, one of the things that we have a problem with is sometimes we talk like nerds and people don't understand a word of what we're saying. You can start using acronyms, you can start doing these terms, and so just making sure that you're using some of those words that do help communicate, but it's a relatable so that the person you're sitting across from understands the thing that you're talking about and what that looks like. So that's what makes a good story. Some of those key things, again, 2 to 4 Polaroids is what I put. Typically, most people kind of go for 3. And then you want it to be clear, you want it to be concise, you want it to be compelling. And so I'd love to give you guys, I'll open the floor for questions about those things. And then let's take maybe like 15-ish minutes. And when I start to give a warning on that and you all revolt, I'll give you a few more minutes. And it'll be like the encore at a show. It's like, oh no, like I'll give you a few more minutes and then we'll go from there. And is there anybody that wants to go ahead and say, I volunteer as tribute to share your story? Draft. Awesome. Sweet. So and then a little bit, I'll have you come up and then you and I will set up chairs. We'll be sitting at a Starbucks together. You'll share your story. We'll try to, I might, depending on time, I might cut you off at some point, and then I'll just give a little bit of constructive feedback, and so that you guys can kind of hear some of that as well. And then I'll be around and hanging for any questions. So any questions about writing your story, if you go to, you'll see there's like a space here to kind of jot down like potential Polaroids, but then the next few pages are just like half pages of lines that you can begin to write out, draft out some of those Polaroids. So any questions? Yeah. Yeah, so you're going to take a snapshot of time and like oftentimes a moment to describe, if you want to just use like a really simple framework, let's use 3 Polaroids and we're going to say how you got saved, like how did Jesus come and save you? What does that look like? Maybe story for a lot of times, if you grew up in a Christian household, sometimes it's like, here's how I got saved. Here's how I really came to know Jesus and committed my life as a disciple. And then here's this snapshot from here how I really got into ministry. Or maybe your Polaroid is like, here's how I got saved, and here's a time of my life where I just felt hopeless, and here are these things and that. And then this ministry came and gave me hope. It showed me who Jesus was, and that's where I am now being a part of this ministry and something like that. So 3 kind of snapshot moments that you're just using as a framework to keep yourself from giving a 30-minute like story that goes everywhere. Yeah. I would say oftentimes this is the 3 to 5 minutes like the beginning of a time together where you're really helping them get to know you. Now, if that story of something there is like impactful and then that's when I realized like, oh, I just want to keep doing this. This thing here, I want to keep doing this. Let me tell you what this is. Or you then begin to add some ministry stories there near the end at like, here's how we're answering the need. We're doing this ministry. Here's this tournament we had, and here's a story that just happened, that kind of stuff. But you kind of put that little bit.
Particularly the section that you were
Yeah, this is like, hey, get to know me. Let me share my story with you. Yeah. Feel free to go ahead and start and be jotting down and some of your stuff up top, right? You could I could see you saying like, here's my story in a few minutes. And that video might be a little different. But I think that right now what you're saying is, hey, here's 3 to 5 minutes I have to kind of share more about who I am. So that time box helps you shape a little bit of that dirt. And then it's also a matter of like, what I'm trying to do is help you get to know me, how Jesus saved me. What are those details in that story that are really important to help that? And then that's good. But then if there's a piece of your story, like I've trained some folks and I've coached some folks that have come out of addiction. And so they're going to talk about that really loosely or really like tightly, especially if they don't know the story of the other person or they don't know these things. But if they have a relationship with the other person and like maybe there's somebody else who's come out of addiction, they're now having like a totally different conversation. Their story just blew up to 20 minutes because they're both sharing their stories back and forth, doing things like having a different kind of conversation. So the answer to your question is depends. Good luck. And I can help if you have maybe specific situations or questions in mind. I can come around to the table and chat with you in just a second with that. So yeah.
Can I also add to his point as well?
Yeah.
A lot of people who are looking into ministry, they think of some rainbow bridge of unrealism that this person doesn't understand where I'm coming from in my situation. Especially for the people that I kind of speak to, I let them know, like, yes, I understand that I have bills to pay. Yes, I have problems. I have real life problems. Yes, it may be unsafe where I'm going to, but however, this is the reason why I follow Jesus Christ. This is the reason why I am so dedicated to this work, because it helps me, because it helps so many other people. So just to kind of also add to that as well, a lot of people do like the realism because, again, they're living in the materialistic world. So they a lot of times they want to see how can this help that, and then when it does help that situation, they start to look at the more broader thing.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Go ahead and take some time to work, and then I'll just kind of come check in at tables. If you have another question, I'll go ahead and address that there with you. And then let's say I'm going for a bit. At 10 after, I'll do the fake encore thing and check in. We'll do a few more minutes, and we'll jump in from there. Does that sound good? Awesome. All right. Hey friends, let's go ahead and jump in. Now that I think about it, for bingo, that might have been my first friends. That might have been, was that my first? Yeah, just go. Hey, sorry, I didn't bring enough moleskins, bro. All right, hey, so we're gonna jump in. As a reminder for what this is in this moment, you've sat down with somebody, you've started to kind of have some time, and now you're gonna kind of transition into sharing more about the thing, but this is just the very first few minutes of what would typically be if you do like buy the play, which you don't have to, like all the things, but it's just like, here's the thing, and then everybody kind of makes it your own. But you did it, you're gonna be talking for about 30, 40 minutes with some questions in between there. This is just that first like 3 to 5 to kind of share what's going on and what that looks like. And again, all of this with the principles of this, that shape is applicable anywhere. It's applicable into a different live stream. It's applicable into a thing. You would shift some of those things and how that looks. But that's what that is. So we're gonna sit down. We're going to do some classic D&D. We're going to role play a little bit. So I am assuming a role so that he doesn't have to do mental math in his head of explaining like why he would say something. It's like he has a relationship with this person. He's just going to jump for it. So what's my name again?
Greg.
Greg. I am Greg from God's Garage.
Yep.
All right. Greg from God's Garage. And I'm going to take notes so that I don't forget. Thanks. Actually, would you mind wearing this?
No, I don't mind.
Do you mind this being in the internet forever?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or at least until our planet blows up. Ooh. I am not familiar with roads. Are you more familiar?
I have far more embarrassing things on the internet. So.
Word.
I think it's broken.
Juliet, my pop fell off.
There we go.
There we are. Got it. Thanks. All right.
Yeah.
And play.
So yeah, Greg, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself. I was born and raised in the church, and so I don't really know what life outside of the church is like, but I do know what life without Jesus is like. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and my dad was a full-time farmer, and he was a full-time minister. So I never saw him. He was like gone before I woke up. He was back after I was asleep. But we were raised, my family and I have 3 siblings, and we were raised in a very legalistic Christian home. So the church that I was raised in was super performance-based. And I felt like God called me into the ministry. I don't know how to explain this, but I felt like God called me into the ministry when I was 8 years old. I remember where it was. I was standing in a wheat field. The wheat was taller than I was. The wind was blowing. I could smell the dirt. And very clearly just felt like God said, I have you set aside for something. I didn't know what that was for many, many years to come. But I think because of that, I always felt the need to live up to this performance-based Christianity. And like the church that I was in really sort of was training us to be the Captain Americas, the Wonder Womans of the faith, right? And so I go to Bible college. I meet my wife there. Wonderful woman. As you do. We have our first kid. She's pregnant with our second. And I'm 22 years old at this point, and I just decide I don't know how to be Captain America. I can't do it. It's too hard. I had zero joy in it. Trying to do everything right my whole life, and it wasn't working. And I ended up having an emotional affair online with a woman in the UK. And I was ready to leave. And at the time, I was in the Air Force, and I was ready to leave my wife, pregnant, my firstborn son, and not only that, but if I ever come back, go to prison for abandoning my active duty status. That's where I was, and my wife didn't do anything wrong. Consummate wife. I mean, just brilliant, loving, wonderful, wonderful woman. And because I loved her in a way, the best way that I knew how to love somebody. I didn't want to blindside her. So I told her what was happening, and I told her what my plan was. Greg, I can never hardly tell the story without crying. So maybe I'll get through it with you. I told her we were sitting on our little hand-me-down couch and just toys all over the room. And I told her. And she waited like 30 seconds. It was probably what it was, but it felt like 30 minutes. And when she was done, she said, "When you get back, I will forgive you. And I love you." It just blew my mind. And even though I was in the church my whole life, I think that was the first time that it really struck me how Jesus loves me. And it changed me. But I spent the next 15 years trying to think, well, if Jesus loves me that much, I have to be Captain America. And so I kind of missed the entire point that it was the relationship that I had with my wife and the love that was born out of the relationship was what Christ was all about. It wasn't the performance-based stuff. So about 15 years later, God called us to plant a church, and we didn't know what that looked like. We didn't know what that meant. I was on staff as a creative director at a very successful church plant. Within 5 years, they were running about 1,200 people, very attractional based, and we were doing really well. And I thought, okay, well, this is what it looks like. They're successful, so we need to go be successful. What I knew, but I didn't acknowledge at the time, is I knew our front door in that church was as big as our back door. About as many people were coming in as were leaving, but I didn't understand the why behind that. Anyhow, God calls us to go plant. We didn't know where. We literally traveled a few places in the world trying to figure out where it was. And finally, God whittled it down to somewhere between Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, and Chicago. So we took a Thanksgiving break and we drove that with our kids. So we're in this smelly minivan with 5 kids going crazy in the back and Taco Bell wrappers everywhere. And we're just saying, and we stayed off the highways because I didn't want to exclude the small cities in case that's where he wanted us. Yeah. So we're just driving through these highways or byways really and saying, God, you don't have to tell us yes, but will you please give us clear no's? And he did. Like we would drive through and we'd see a sign, now entering such and such. And I'd look at my wife and she's like, nope. And I'm like, yeah, I agreed, nope. Well, we came across a place called Zionsville, Indiana. And I think we must have drove through a thumb of it because we saw the first sign, now entering Zionsville, Indiana. And I didn't get a no, and she didn't get a no. And we were just like, okay, we'll keep driving. And then we saw another sign like 2 miles later that said it again, now entering Zionsville, Indiana. We both look at each other, we're just bawling.
Yeah.
I don't know, like it was just a God thing. So we go there, and I'm there to plant this attractional church. We sold everything we had, our business, everything, and we go to plant this church. And within 2 weeks of us being there, I felt like God said, I didn't call you here to plant this attractional church. I called you here to make disciples in relationship. And I was like, I don't know what that means. But over the course of time, it's what we were trying to do. We started small groups, but mostly Christians wanted to be involved, and we were trying to reach people outside that community. So my son threw a Smash Brothers party, and he invited kids from all over the city who didn't know each other, and they were all playing this game together, and nobody was talking as teenagers who don't know each other, kind of that awkward. But then somebody said, hey, I do this thing called D&D. Anybody want to do a one-shot campaign? So they all went from playing video games to sitting at our kitchen table playing D&D, and within 30 minutes, they're all laughing and talking, and I thought, this is what I want our small groups to look like. We're missing this. So we stopped doing our small group the way we were doing it before. We did D&D, Dungeons and Dragons and Discipleship, and that group grew from 6 people to so many people we couldn't fit, so we branched it, and then we branched it again, and then other churches found out what we were doing, and we taught them how to do it, and they branched it again. So we went from 1 group to 6 groups in the Indianapolis area. And then COVID hit and closed everything down, and we weren't able to continue with it, and by the time that COVID was over, financially we had just fallen apart because nobody was coming, so nobody was giving. And God's called us down now to Conroe, Texas, where we're starting over and we're doing the same thing again. And that's kind of how I came from being an 8-year-old in a wheat field to now pastoring a church in Conroe that's focused on reaching those people.
Yeah, that's great. End scene.
And see.
Everybody? thanks for sharing your story. Thank you for your tears. I'm a crier too.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand.
Kindred spirits, I saw.
Yeah. Yes. That was great. And also, I was about to be like, we're about to have this whole conversation. I cannot react to the fact that you're in Indy, but you're not anymore. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I'm in Indianapolis for those that didn't catch that. So, and I get the feeling of seeing some of these small town signs and going, no, that's not it for me. Dude, it phenomenal. One, just want to say, like, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for, like, all the ways in which you were like, here's this. It was cool to see God moving in and through, and especially, right, it's hard. I talked about this table a little bit, but like, when you're telling your story, you're gonna miss so many impactful things. You can't share everything, right? There's something that happened in that 15 years that's probably worth telling. There's 50 million things worth in that 15 years. But at some point in the story, we're just kind of fast forwarding, and so, but just seeing the faithfulness of God and the faithfulness of your wife to show love and compassion and these things, it's just unreal. So, a couple, I think, just kind of quick things to give some feedback on. It's really great.
There she is.
Hey! You had a line right at the beginning.
Just sit over there. I'm just inviting you in. She's done with her group, and our room is right there. So I just saw her. I'm like, come in.
Your line right at the beginning of like, I know a life without Jesus, or it was something with life. It was just like a great line. I was like, that's such a good, quick. Some of those things, the wheat field story, like your Polaroids, right? You had wheat field, you had the couch, and then the driving and the Taco Bell wrappers. Like it was like I was like, yep, I know that thing. Can relate to that. Thought it was really good, and even just as I was listening, I had you guys. It is like the way that you set up in good storytelling. Like here was this path I could have set aside for like this, or like no, I'll just go this way. Like here's this path, and you kept like drawing those analogies for me, and I really appreciated it. Yeah, thought it was really good. I have an imagination, and maybe Greg.
Greg, yeah.
From Bob's Garage in my mind, which is probably some Bob's Burger Garage like combination here. Greg, a Smash tournament, D&D, like I don't know if they know what those terms are, so it might be helpful in the certain conversations to like, hey, so here are the, doing the things here, like the attractional church is the way I wanted to do it. That wasn't working. But then my son had a bunch of friends over to play video games. The game they were playing is Smash Brothers, and they're like playing against each other, and they're taking turns doing the thing. And what I noticed was just the way that they were having conversations, and like, you know what I mean? So it's like a way to like start here, and then that can help kind of invite them in to know exactly what it is versus, because if not, they might be spinning on, okay, what is that thing? What is that? And then they've missed the thing that you wanted, which is like, here's a bunch of kids just having fun together, and this is what I want, right? And so the same thing, D&D is hard because it's like, how could you even begin to start, right? But, and then we notice like, hey, we're just coming together, playing this game. It's actually Dungeons and Dragons, but sitting around a table together, telling a story, playing a game, and I just noticed like, oh, this is the thing. This is what's happening. And so that was just one piece of feedback. I think it was really good. And then as you began to practice and just say it more, right, it would just, some of those things would really flow. So I think there was a few things like the story of sitting on the couch and doing some of those things. I think it was just a little bit like, because again, this was his first time sharing it in this format, which was, he did amazing, right? But it's just like, oh, this like little detail here, this little, maybe this thing, I said this kind of side comment, and it's just, you'll get, that'll shape itself a little clearer. But dude, I mean, it's, the 3 Polaroids were clear, the movement of, and even the, like the full wrap of set aside, here's the wheat field, here are these paths, and then here's where we ended, because you chose, and this is me just continuing to respond, of like, you just chose to be faithful to God and who God was. And even I have a lot of friends and stories of people I know that went and tried to plant an attractional thing, and they kept trying and they kept trying and kept trying, and you're going, okay, God, what is this, and what is this thing? Is again, nothing wrong with attractional. I'm not saying there's something wrong with attractional inherently, but there is that thing. So I thought it was great. The story was great. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
One more round of applause, please. Awesome. Hey, we do have maybe a quick burning question or two, and then we will let people start huffing and puffing their way around the hills to the different things. Try to talk away so I don't pop too hard. Hey.
One quick question. I don't have to go into crazy depth with this, but when it comes to explaining a game to somebody who does not understand the game,
Yeah.
how in depth do you go?
Totally. Yeah, so the question was, in going to explain a game that somebody may not know, how in depth do you go, what do you do, and all that sort of stuff. I think my curiosity, if I think specifically League, I think specifically like that sort of realm. I think as you're developing the rest of the things you're gonna say, the community aspects, maybe you're gonna pull on building a community, maybe you're gonna pull on like whatever the things you're gonna kind of pull on, I would then emphasize the dynamics of League that are within that are gonna tie into that later, even if you don't do it directly then, but you're gonna do it later, right? Because you could get into all sorts of things and, you know, like, well, there's lanes you gotta understand, and if you're mid, this is what that means. Like, you could do these things, but it's, learning how to be gracious with somebody when they make mistakes. It's a team-based game that really depends on everybody kind of playing their role. Sometimes that doesn't go well, like those sorts of things. So, you know what I mean? There's like just some quick, like, I'm making it up as I go, but I would love to chat more about that. But that's, I think, how I would kind of emphasize that.
I would also just add, sometimes in that, people don't need to know what the game is or the details about it. They
100%.
just need to know the cultural impact of it.
Yes.
Right? So, hey, the game is called League of Legends. You might not know anything about it, but there's more people that watch League of Legends pros than any other pro sport on the planet. And
Yeah.
this is one of the most important cultural things that are going on right now, and there are hundreds of millions of people flocking to it. So there's a huge opportunity for the gospel, I think.
Yeah, totally. It wasn't.
That would be really effective. And they don't understand what we're doing, explain the impact that it can have rather than details about what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, wasn't it League Worlds that sold out the Staples Center a few years ago? Yeah, it's like, I mean, like, yeah, so that's, yeah, the comment, right?
It was the most watched e-sport of all time this summer at Worlds, 6.9 million people.
6.9, yeah, so, yeah, so Mark's comment was basically, and they don't even need to know the game, but it can just be to share the impact of that game worldwide and what that looks like and how that can play out. So that can even do its own work, so.